What was your strangest experience at someone's house? Story 1. As a 12 years old, we shifted to a small town from our cattle property so we kids could go to high school. I didn't know anyone at school till the weird kid befriended me, invited me home after school one day. There's me thinking, great, I'm making friends. When we got there, her mom was obviously slightly drunk. No father around that I could see, just sitting in her room talking crap when her mom calls us into her bedroom. So we went in and her mom is lying on a single bed and there's a double in there that we both sort of lounged on. Then her mom starts crying. The girl tells me her dad died about 6 months ago. I'm going, so sorry to hear that. Her mom starts telling me how he was a bad alcoholic and they'd gone to bed one night. He was spooning her when he died in his sleep with his arms wrapped around the mum. 'Cause she was drunk too, she didn't wake up till quite late and his body had started rigor mortis. She realizes and starts screaming. Daughter runs in. Dad is dead and mum is stuck in his arms. Had to call police to help apparently. She couldn't get out. Best bit though was I was sitting on the bed where he died 6 months previous, but they'd never changed the sheets or covers. They smelled musty. No wonder the girl acted weird. They both really needed therapy, but this was nearly 50 years ago. Story 2. I met up with this guy to go for our first date and ended up back at his house, which he shared with his parents. No big deal, right? As soon as I stepped through the door, the smell of animal feces hits me like a brick. I held my breath and entered the lounge, where there was rubbish and boxes stacked as high as the ceiling. Even in this dude's room, there were boxes and rubbish. They had about 10 cats running around, 5 hamsters, I'm pretty sure one of them was dead in the cage, 3 birds all cooped up in one small bird cage, 3 dogs, and an iguana. I never saw him again after I made my excuses and left. Blocked the dude's number and blocked and deleted him from my socials. Story 3. When I was about 10, my cousins and I were sleeping at my grandma's house in Oklahoma. My Uncle Rick came home drunk and got loud, so my grandma started yelling at him and hitting him with a rolled-up magazine. My other Uncle Cecil, who was only 4 years older than us, told us 3 kids to run out the back door and hide at the creek because Rick's a mean drunk. It's about midnight and we run down to the creek and stand around looking at each other for about 10 minutes and then we walk back. We come in through the front door with muddy feet and leaves in our hair. Uncle Rick had already gone to bed and he wasn't mean at all. My grandma yells at us asking why we were outside. We say we were hiding at the creek. She says, "Who told you to hide at the creek?" We all point at Uncle Cecil, who was in the corner laughing. She starts chasing him around the table and beating him with a magazine. He was hiding his face, yelling ow 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 like he was in pain, but I could see he was still laughing. We all ran to the bedroom and jumped in bed and pulled the covers over our heads until it got quiet and we went to sleep. Story 4. It was a chilly evening in November when I decided to stay over at my friend's house. I had known her for years and we had always talked about how fun it would be to have a sleepover, just like old times. However, as the night progressed, I soon realized that this experience would be anything but fun. As soon as I entered her home, I felt a strange vibe. The lighting was dim and everything had a reddish tint to it. I didn't think too much of it, as I assumed it was just a decorative choice on my friend's part. But when I asked her about it, she told me that her family only used red light bulbs because an astrologer had advised them to do so. At first, I thought she was joking, but as the night went on, I soon realized that she was serious. Everything, from the living room to the kitchen, was illuminated by red light bulbs. It was like living in a horror movie. I couldn't help but feel uneasy, and I knew that I wouldn't be able to sleep in such an environment. To make matters worse, my friend's family seemed to have embraced the astrologer's advice wholeheartedly. They talked about it as if it were a scientific fact and even went as far as to explain to me the benefits of red light therapy. I was skeptical, but I didn't want to offend them, so I just nodded and smiled. As the night went on, I became more and more anxious. I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off. I didn't know if it was the red light bulbs or the fact that my friend's family was so adamant about their belief in astrology. Either way, I knew that I had to get out of there. The next morning, I woke up early, feeling exhausted and drained. I couldn't wait to leave. I said my goodbyes to my friend and her family and left as quickly as I could. As I walked out of the house, I couldn't help but feel relieved that I was finally out of that eerie red-lit environment. Story 5. A buddy and I were walking down the street and noticed a drunk guy bothering a woman outside a store and his balls were hanging out of his shorts. We stopped to help, And so does some guy in an army jacket. And after the cops come by to deal with the drunk guy, the army guy invites us over to have a beer. We were about 14 or so at the time. We said sure, get to his apartment, and he gives us a beer each, and shows us his big knife, tells us how to gouge out eyes, and how to shoot someone under the chin at the throat pointing up so if by chance they survive, they will be paralyzed. Then proceeds to demonstrate to me a choke move he was taught, which f***ing hurt. My friend had the knife in hand just in case army guy didn't let go. After I was let go and able to breath, we pieced out of there fast. The longer we sat there, the more scared I was getting. Haven't thought about that for some time. Story 6. Not only the weirdest, but also not my proudest. A good friend of mine and I were just partying a lot and making bad decisions, drinking a lot, being very carefree about what we did and who we spent time with, a lot of things I don't care to get into. We drove 3 hours away to partake in our bad decisions. Friend blacks out in the car. I'm struggling to get him to wake up. I was really worried about him at that point. He just wasn't breathing very much and wasn't responding to being punched or slapped or anything. Eventually, he does wake up kind of confused. I notice he has a headlight out and it's dark and he's not good to drive and I don't technically have a license. The risks seem to really outweigh the rewards of getting back home and crashing at his place. So we agreed that we should probably just get to the nearest hotel and book a room and go home in the morning after being sobered up. We get to a gas station not even a mile away just to go in, grab some Gatorade or something, and start looking up hotels. This older woman we've never met walks up to our car and asks if we have a lighter. She's obviously been crying. We give her a lighter and ask if she's a local and if she knows where the closest hotel is because we need to crash. She tells us she for sure could show us a hotel not far away cause her man just got mad at her and freaked out and went to this hotel for the night. We agreed. Then she suggested that we should save our money and we could crash at her place right behind the gas station. Our inhibitions are pretty low and my friend looks at me and says I'm not opposed to it. And at that point I only had $30 to my name which wouldn't get us shit, and she seemed safe so I figured alright, guess we are gonna check it out. She was a very sweet lady. I would never in a million years do that ever again. We get to her house and she's got the bed on the floor in the living room and keeps a cane or something against the door as that part of town is super dangerous and scares her without her boyfriend being there. She offers up the bed and takes the couch. She's really cool and pretty harmless but definitely a heavy drinker. We were too, so whatever. She gets drunk, we get pretty f***ed up ourselves. She has a guitar that I played and she actually gave to me. She recorded me singing and even put it on her Facebook. We taught her how to add us, how to use her cell phone because she didn't know how to use Messenger and she had a lot of messages she'd never checked, one in particular from her high school sweetheart, so they started talking and she was grateful for that. Not long into the night she is on the couch basically trying to seduce us. Lol. We told her we weren't really interested in all of that, way too f***ed up anyway for our plumbing to even work. We weren't offended at all. We really did not have the capacity to care or be creeped out and we didn't want her to feel embarrassed. She ends up saying something like, if I touch myself don't y'all say shit, and she then just passed out immediately and didn't do anything. Lol. We left, agreed that it was a strange night, but our adventures to this city were not over for a while. Every other weekend for probably 3 months after, until my friend finally had the strength to treat his alcoholism in rehab, which inevitably led me to rethinking my life decisions too. She wasn't too handy with her phone, but we did go to visit her again every time that we went to that city and stayed the night again a few more times. Nothing weird ever happened again. She was lonely and always so thrilled to see us, and we would take her for car rides as she didn't have a car and listen to music. She eventually called us after we both cleaned up our acts and started trying to focus on work and not party, asking why she hadn't seen us in a couple months. Said she had went to a homeless shelter briefly but inevitably ended up with that guy that she reconnected with and he had a nice place and they were doing well and that we should come see her nice new place and stay. We really weren't in a position to go back. That was the last I ever heard from her. She never messaged back much on Facebook to begin with, but I have tried to reach out a few times and not gotten an answer. I just hope that she's alive and well. It was a very weird experience, but I think fondly of her. Story 7. This one time I was with my girlfriend and we weren't doing very well in the relationship. We were in the driveway talking and we ended up sitting in her car while we talked about how the relationship wasn't the same as before and how we weren't really feeling like it was going anywhere. The regular talk before a breakup. It was pretty tense and kinda sad. We noticed that the bathroom window was on, so we lowered our voices as we didn't want her family to hear us talking about breaking up. She was about to cry when we heard a massive, compressed fart echo through the confines of the porcelain toilet. The atmosphere changed entirely. We tried not to laugh, but it was impossible not to. Her mom called her with doubt as she asked her name. We rushed the hell out of the car and proceeded to laugh our asses off. That day, whatever her mom ate before laying the log saved our relationship. We didn't break up until a few months later. Story 8. When I was 14, I went to a friend's house for a birthday party sleepover. There were 5 other girls invited. After dinner, we settled in the lounge room to watch horror movies. Her parents came in and sat on the couch, took out 2 huge bongs, and got stoned. They started commenting on the movie as we watched it, like it was a live sports event. This was the first time all us girls had seen drugs or been around someone on drugs. So weird. Birthday girl was so embarrassed. We never went back to her house for a sleepover after that one. Story 9. When I was a kid, I went to a friend's house for a sleepover. I was excited to spend the night at my friend's house and to play with all of her toys. However, as the night went on, I realized that this would be a sleepover that I would never forget, and not for good reasons. At some point, my friend's family decided to go out for dinner. I assumed that they would ask me to join them, but they didn't. Instead, they left me alone in the house while they went out to eat. I was shocked and didn't know what to do. I sat in the living room, feeling awkward and uncomfortable. I didn't know if I should just wait for them to come back or if I should call my parents and ask them to come and pick me up. In the end, I decided to wait it out. As I sat in the living room, I noticed an Atari console sitting on the shelf. I had never played an Atari before, so I decided to give it a try. I spent the next few hours playing Atari while my friend's family was out having dinner. When they finally returned home, they acted as if nothing had happened. They didn't apologize for leaving me alone or ask if I was okay. I felt hurt and ignored, like I was just an afterthought to them. The rest of the sleepover was uncomfortable, and I couldn't wait to go home. I never went back to my friend's house again, and I never forgot the way they treated me. Story 10. I had a friend that had an older brother that was clearly on drugs and some other questionable things. I hated being around her or her home because it reeked of urine and pet excrement. One day while there, her brother was high out of his mind and started screaming at her over a banana peel that she had left out. Calling her abusive slurs, body shaming her, everything. He came running down the stairs so hard the walls shook and got in my face asking if I leave trash around my house too. My smart mouth said, "I don't eat bananas." I don't remember much after that, but I froze in fear. Her mom was an alcoholic and pretty nasty. She would drop us off at the Dollar Theater in the middle of the night, type of careless. Her house was filthy despite having a maid coming in every so often, and they often joked about and sex. I didn't get it. I was 11, maybe 12. I quickly dropped her because she started to behave in an abusive manner towards me, name-calling, throwing things, being very controlling about everything. We were in middle school. I had problems of my own and I didn't need anyone projecting their anger towards me. She left a note in my locker calling me every nasty name under the sun with a drawing of me as some ugly monster. Phone calls were made. Her mother started making weird accusations about me and my mother told me to stay away from her. A year later, I received another note but at my family mailbox. No envelope, so clearly dropped off at my home. It was from that girl saying she was moving and hoping we could be friends and didn't understand why we weren't talking anymore. Super weird. I thought I was being watched, so I looked around my surroundings and tore the note into tiny pieces and threw it on the ground, hoping, if she was there, she could see I wanted nothing to do with her or her family. Last I heard, her brother ended up in jail in Mexico for drug trafficking or something similar. Story 11. My mom and aunt went out one night and they had my older cousin watch me and my younger cousins. I wasn't super close with them and really hadn't spent one-on-one time with my older cousin who was watching us. I can't remember what happened that he felt the need to take his bow out, but he did. I was sitting on the couch watching a movie and he stood over top of me, loaded the bow, and pulled it back as far as he could. He had been hunting since he was really young, so he somewhat knew what he was doing and held it to my forehead for what felt like a really long time. I was maybe 7 or 8, so I ran and grabbed whatever I could, which was an old metal vacuum pole, and hit him over the head with it. I hid until the adults got home and he told them what I did but neglected to mention the whole arrow pointed to my brain situation. His dad ended up giving me a good beating and no one believed me about what actually happened. My cousins also sided with him and said that I went too far. Safe to say I don't talk to any of them anymore. Story 12. Me and a bunch of work dudes had a younger guy we worked with, so we went to his birthday drinks, which was cool, but all his friends were still 17 years old or so while we were mid-20s. What was meant to be a quiet night for me escalated quickly. Despite having the intention to drive home after 2 beers, I got so pissed that another mate of mine took me back to his house to crash. We got back to him, and because his sister wasn't home that night, he put me to rest in her bed, all nice and pink and frilly and whatnot. A couple of hours later, I wake up with the most immense need to piss in my life. So I get out of this pink bed and waltz into the hallway. I have never been in this house before, so I don't have a clue where anything is. Mind you, I've been told his parents are asleep next to the room I'm in. I do my best, half stumbling, half naked, and falling over everywhere, trying to find a toilet. At this point, it felt like I had a knife in the end of my schlong because of how hard I was holding back this piss. Finally, I see what must be the toilet room at the end of another hallway, only to find that the door is locked. There's no one in there. The toilet is simply locked. I go back and forward through this whole house twice, dying in need of a piss. Every room is locked, and no lights are turning on. So here I am, trying to be quiet in what I'm starting to assume is a house I may not mean to be in. I think, f*** it, I'm pissing in the yard. Except all the doors and windows to get outside are locked from the key barrel, and all the keys have been removed. I can't even piss outside. I thought I'll not be disrespectful and piss in the kitchen sink in case someone comes out. So I go back into the sister's supposed room in the hope I can MacGyver my way to bladder release. And I see it, an empty soft drink bottle. Well, this piss comes out so hard I nearly dropped the bottle. I nearly fill this fucking thing to the brim. Of course, I didn't care. There was a small possibility some splashback occurred. I can't recall. I was lucky enough to even still be standing upright. Eventually, my bladder is empty. My bottle is full. I replaced the cap and called it a night. I wake up to a grown man I've never seen before staring at me with the door wide open. Me, still pissed, unknown to this guy, in what I assume was his daughter's bed. We make prolonged eye contact, and he then continues down the hallway. I hear him say something along the lines I have no idea who that guy is as they continue down the hall. He was followed by 2 or 3 tradesmen behind him. I start thinking, what the f*** have I gotten into? I stand up, get my pants on, also not a good look coming out of someone's daughter's room, and as my pants are buckling, a girl appears to not be overly pleased at me exiting what I assumed was her bed. I say sorry, grab my piss bottle, the color within made it obvious it was piss, and walk out. And here's my mate simply having breakfast in the dining area. After some bacon and a laugh, I find out the house is undergoing extensive renovations. The toilets in that part of the house are buggered, so they're kept locked, and the power was disconnected too. It wasn't until after we all ate and laughed that I realized I should take my piss bottle out from under the dining table to the outside bin. All in all, good memory. Story 13. We went to a foreign classmate's house to do our film class project. He said that since we're making a horror film, we could try filming in the dark storage space above the dining room. So indeed, he climbed up there to get some establishing shots, but as soon as he crawled in, we found out the ceiling wasn't made of concrete and he ended up breaking the ceiling and falling down. Luckily, he wasn't hurt, but now there's a big human-sized hole in the ceiling. Needless to say, his parents were pissed and we had to change our filming location to my aunt's condo. Story 14. Went to a friend's early Saturday in middle school, possibly 9th grade. Went grocery shopping with her, her sister, and mom. Well, we got back and I had a bunch of bags of groceries waiting in the garage by the door. My friend said to just go in. I didn't want to because her dad was home and I didn't meet him yet. My friend insisted it was fine. I went in from the garage door, and when I looked in directly to the right in the kitchen, her dad was cooking something on the stove. In only his tidy whities, I don't remember which expletive he yelled, but I immediately went back out the way I came. I can only imagine the face I was making. Somehow, my friend convinced me to still stay the night. I was deeply embarrassed and avoided her father. Lol, I felt like such a bad guest. I always knocked and I was mostly mad at her for telling me to go in. Hilarious now though. Story 15. When I was about 10 years old, I went to my friend's house to play with some other friends. Everything was going great until her little brother came down to the basement with us. He was in a walker, and we were all excited to play with him. But then, something terrible happened. As we were all playing and having fun, her brother crawled out of his walker and started to crawl towards the stairs. Her brother forgot to close the gate, and before we knew it, the little boy was tumbling down the stairs in his walker. It was one of the scariest things I have ever seen. At first, I thought he was dead. The way he tumbled down the stairs, it was like he had no control over his body. I couldn't believe my eyes, and I felt like my heart had stopped. It felt like time stood still for what felt like forever before he finally started crying. I was relieved that he was alive, but I was still terrified. The sound of his cries echoed throughout the entire house, and it was deafening. I didn't know what to do, and I felt helpless. My friend's parents rushed down to the basement, and I could see the fear and concern on their faces. They quickly picked up the little boy and examined him to make sure he was okay. Thankfully, he only suffered a few scratches and bruises, but it was still a traumatizing experience for everyone involved. After that incident, I didn't know what to do or say. I was still in shock and didn't want to cause any more trouble, so I decided to leave the house and go home. As I walked home, I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. It was a nightmare, and I couldn't shake the feeling of fear and helplessness that I had experienced. Story 16. 18 and in college, a drunk guy beating on his girl. Me and some random dude chased the guy off and made sure the girl was alright. I was pretty drunk and the random guy invited me back for a drink. I end up at this guy's apartment a few blocks away, guns everywhere. A legit small mountain of cocaine on the table. He's telling me about all the stuff he did in the Middle East while serving, crazy-ass stories about killing people and watching his friends die. The whole time he's doing copious amounts of blows, he was looking at me super strange and kept trying to get me to take these pills. After a while, I was 100% certain he was going to try and rape me and was being super weird when I said I needed to get going soon. I excused myself to his bathroom, opened the tiny window and wiggled my way out and dropped from the second story. As I was running away, I could hear him kick the bathroom door in and start screaming. So yay, I'm pretty sure I was about to be drugged and raped by this giant guy.